All right, let's welcome everyone. Aparna and Kris from OpenSearch, who are going to talk to us about the importance of measuring trust and especially what community contributes to that.
Hello, everyone. Hopefully, you can hear me here. Hopefully, you're having a great conference so far. Thank you to Ubuntu, our host here, for a spectacular session so far. And special thanks for having us here on stage for what we're going to present today. So, consider this you have a large open source project on one end that is sponsored by a large corporation. So the big question here that we're trying to look at is, in such a situation, how does the community view the open source project? Do they trust the project? Do they not trust the project? If they do trust the project, what are underlying reasons for them trusting the project? And if they don't trust the project, what can we do to better understand what are their concerns? This is exactly what we are going to kind of kind of explore in this particular talk. We're also going to look at best practices, recommendations, and what we can do as open source projects that will serve everyone. My name is Aparna Sundar. I'm a researcher in open source project, and this is my colleague, Kris Freedain.
Thank you, Aparna. As she said, my name is Kris Freedain. I'm the community manager for the OpenSearch project. We're both employed by AWS. We're not speaking on their behalf, and our opinions expressed today are our own. Today's agenda, we're going to be going through some trust in open source, discussing that in length due to a survey that Aparna had put together. Some recommendations to enhance that community trust and keep building trust with your community. Metrics and findings that Aparna found during this quarterly survey. I find them fascinating as a community manager myself, so I believe everyone else will. Ways to foster trust that we embrace both at Amazon and with the OpenSearch project, as well as some practical things that I take on as a community manager and maybe some recommendations you could take back to your own communities. First, a little bit about the OpenSearch project. OpenSearch is a community-driven, Apache 2.0 licensed, open source search and analytics suite. You can use it to ingest, search, visualize, and analyze your data. As of October of this year, there were over 1,000 different individual contributors. We have 200 maintainers, more than 200 maintainers across 17 different organizations. So it's growing. It's kind of a really fun thing to watch grow. As of, so we have over 3,000 members in our community forum. And then as of April this year, we launched a Slack that already has over 1,400 members. So it's growing quickly, and that's been pretty fun so far.
All right, let's go ahead and start off with trust in open source. What are we talking about when we're thinking about trust in open source? If you do a quick scan of the internet, this is an example of what you'll see. You'll see a lot of blogs that are out there that are talking about, reasons to not trust open source software. And if you do a quick scan of that, we see certain themes that start to emerge. You'll see some of the challenges of trusting free software. If it's free, is it going to be of good quality? You'll see a lot of vulnerability warnings that people will give saying, hey, it's free software, anything can change at any time. Is this something you really want to trust? There's also a lack of legal obligations that they'll warn you about in the sense that, anytime licenses can change, so you want to watch out for that as well. Other things that you will get cautionary notes are on lack of security expertise. Open source software may not have the security that your software that you're proprietarily building may require. So that's another problem as well. There could be an excess focus on features and functionalities. Open source software does not have good user experience. People will not be able to use it. You'll have usability problems. You'll have problems building what you need, and there's no backing. So these are common themes we tend to see. So here we're wondering about how can we ameliorate some of these concerns of trusting open source software Kris is first going to share some of his insights on what we do in the open source project, and then I will share some best practices as well.
Thank you, Aparna. A few things that I've found help build trust in an open source environment, especially for the OpenSearch project, that have worked for us. Openness. I know it goes without saying, right? But we're open source. Be open as possible. One of the things that we started hearing feedback on was you're having your development meetings behind closed doors. So we've cracked those open. Corporations can find that a challenge at first, whether proprietary software is used to having these closed door sessions where open source is not. You need to break those out into the open. One of the nice things for us was the security team went first. So I was kind of tickled by that because I now can use that and go, look, security team did it. You can too. We had a nice feedback from our security development manager where he said I think it was his second meeting, he said, Kris, one of the community members, we were triaging something, they wanted it assigned to them, and they're doing a great job of working on this issue for us, or with us, sorry. Invite others. You want to make it as accessible as possible and enable people where you're able to enable them. You can take further actions of building out things where you can invite another member of your community to be a moderator on your forum, something I'm going through right now with one of our incredible community members. As I mentioned earlier, we have maintainers from over 17 different organizations. You enable others, and that builds this trust between organizations. You can have them come in and lead meetings. You can have them maybe even come in and do your releases for the project.
All right, so these are some of the recommendations from our OpenSearch community manager. Other organizations, trusted organizations that have done research over a course of time with other OpenSearch projects do have some recommendations as well in terms of, they don't call it boosting trust, they do call it boosting confidence in open source software. Some of these are creating effective and kind of the impact of enterprise with open source development. So essentially kind of get that enterprise behind you, boost the scale of it, hire and develop from the project's community, thereby fostering some kind of ownership, allocating time for upstream contribution, so increasing the scope, increasing the span of your open source software, setting up a mentorship program, once again, the importance of community there, and then implementing inner sourcing practices as well. So what we did was around a year ago, some of the focus of OpenSearch project was to increase awareness. Over the course of time, Kris and I, we go to a lot of these, we go to a lot of conferences, we talk to a lot of people, and the whole marketing team as well at OpenSearch. And over time, we started realizing that one of the topics that kept coming up with our community members was this concept of trust. So now, where do we start? We need some metrics to go off of because we can't assume they don't trust us, or we can't assume they do trust us. So, which is why we went ahead and started collecting some data. At OpenSearch Project, we run a survey every quarter. The survey spans a whole host of feedback we get from our community members. It's scaled feedback. So apart from the GitHub, we do this, but these are inference-based, these are opinion-based that will get it in. We get feedback on the experience. We get feedback on functions and features and functionalities we need to enhance. We get feedback in terms of perception of open source, OpenSearch as well. So this Q3, we said, all right, we're going to focus on trust because we want to get a baseline of what is it we're measuring. So we don't have a trust in open source software metric anywhere. So what we did was we adopted Katie Payne's trust in organization metric. That was a nice metric to take into consideration because it has 6 of these factors, so 6 of these dimensions. It focuses on dependability, control mutuality, commitment, satisfaction, communal relationships, and exchange relationships. 4 of these items focus on this interpersonal, the social quality that open source projects do have. Dependability and satisfaction is talking directly to us, at least we worded it so it talks directly to the software. For those of us interested in that particular measure, we're going to actually write a blog right after this, after this session here, and we're going to put up some details of this for anyone who's interested to actually look it up. But essentially, for example, if you look at dependability, it has a 4-item measure, right? So the 4, 3, 5, 5, those are the number of items that are there in the actual metric. And then the alpha number that's there is the reliability. Essentially, do those 4 items actually measure a construct? So for example, we had 4 items in dependability. Are they measuring that construct of dependability? So alpha equals to 0.89 indicates that there is a high reliability. We want our reliability score to be between 0.9 and 0.7. So 0.7 and 0.9. Anything below that, you're looking at a lot of variation. You don't know if you're actually measuring the right thing here. So our lowest here, I believe, is that communal relationship, but it's also because it's just a 2-item measure, so it has a high variation. But in general, those measures are off the scores we measured in our survey. So just setting this up as this is our key indicator of perceptions of trust in OpenSearch. So we ran the study in terms of data collection. This was over Q3. We hosted the link on opensearch.org. Recruitment was done on the website. Kris does community meetings twice a month. And so one of those meetings, I think a couple of times, we've gone on, talked to our community members, invited them to participate in this. We also send out partner newsletters. So we've kind of invited them to take part in this as well. And all in all, we got around 36 community members who participated in this particular study. So I'm going to quickly go into our findings. Before we go into our actual findings, in aggregate, let's take a look at who are these individuals who responded. We do anonymize all the detail. We report in aggregate, but this kind of is useful in terms of understanding or contextualizing the result. So first thing that's important to note in our sample is that over 90%, 91.7% were self-service. This is great because OpenSearch can be done self-service, or you can have a managed services that kind of takes over with that. Of the 11% who said that they use a managed service, they quoted AWS, Avon, Logs, Ivy, all those as their particular managed services provider. But the key kind of takeaway there is 91% are self-serve. This means they are the actual developer installing OpenSearch and working with it. So that's a good metric for us to look at. The other metric was we always captured this role metric. We started capturing that in Q1 of 2023. Most of our users actually go through the full journey of OpenSearch. However, there is that end user, which is a low-code user that also uses OpenSearch, or they could be users who go through the entire spectrum. And there is a blog on this on opensearch.org that you can look up in terms of how we're thinking about these individual roles. These roles are domain specific, so they're helpful in terms of prioritizing the amount of UX and UI that these users will require, or how much of assistance. So for example, if you put in like an AI, or you put in any kind of like natural language query and things like that, users or consumers and producers will kind of make use of that a lot more. Infra users can kind of engineer it themselves. They're doing, so this is different kind of behaviors and domain expertise as well. So that's important to kind of capture in our sample as well. And the fact that we had 66% of them also supports the fact that these are self-serve developers or installing things themselves, very technically savvy kind of sample that we're getting here. So that's great. The last thing here in terms of the actual sample itself was in terms of what do you use OpenSearch for? How many of you here are familiar with OpenSearch? Just raise of hands or have used it. Okay, so quite a few of you, that's good. So OpenSearch is, you set up your query engines, you set up your search here. What we found here in this particular sample is we had 63%, over 2/3 of our sample are using it for log analytics or security analytics. Music to our ears, because they can't do that unless they set up OpenSearch for a query mechanism. So that's great, but they're not using it for search. That's fine. It's just indicative of the sample, that they are an evolved sample that is looking at or taking this particular study. Okay, other information about our sample. There are other questions we asked in the survey in terms of how do you use OpenSearch, plugins you use, who's your end users, versions. We also asked a lot of questions about our community meetings. All this will be on the blog. I don't want to go into it in detail today. One note is we did have our NPS score. We captured that with every quarterly survey, which is a net promoter score, was at 64, which is the highest it's ever been in comparison to Q1 and Q2. There are some reasons for that. Q1, which had 57.8 as the closest comparison here, we're actually doing very positive. Our developers really like OpenSearch as a software, which is great. Our results in Q2 had a little twist, and that's going to be on the blog as well. We did have a little bit of a sample mix in that, which is why we had a little dip that particular year. All right. Company size, around a quarter of them belong to large enterprise. And so that's also positive for us because if they're all just self-serve, making solutions for themselves, that's a different context. We did have 25% of the sample that are setting it up for large enterprise. They have a large operation. That's good for us as well. All right. With that sample, context, some of our findings, keep in mind, this is our benchmark of this trust evaluation. Let's just go with the top one, which is the average was 7.4 on a 10-point scale. So 1 to 10, your average is a 5.5. We're looking at a 7.4 in aggregate average in terms of how much they trust OpenSearch project. That's great. That's a good benchmark. The only thing is we don't have a reference point, but at least it's better than the average, so that's good. Some of the interesting findings are in the deeper factors. If you look at the factors there, one of the things that they rated really highly was dependability. And that's fantastic. They think OpenSearch project is, or OpenSearch's software is quite dependable. That's fantastic for our developers. The other metrics such as control, mutuality, commitment, communal relationships, and exchange relationships were all similar to the overall average. So we're looking at a 7.4, 7.5 average, still indicative of that overall, they're good. The social relationships, the social ties that they're saying, positive, excellent. One thing we're looking at that's a really big dip is satisfaction. 7.1 on a satisfaction, which is a dip from that mean 7.4. So in our original survey, we didn't know what we're going to find because, again, this is the first time we are actually gauging perceptions of our community. We did throw in a question in terms of what they liked about OpenSearch and what they disliked about OpenSearch. So we were trying to contextualize, what about satisfaction took a dip. So we looked at some of our findings in terms of the, in terms of what they said about what they disliked about our particular, about the OpenSearch community itself. This is verbatim what they said. Some of the key themes that you can see here are comments on maintainers, community meeting times, the actual comments on features. There were comments of the origins of OpenSearch, the complexity of OpenSearch, and even some comments on Amazon's investment in OpenSearch. So these are some overall themes we're seeing in terms of why they disliked OpenSearch. On the positive side, on the flip side, we saw that there were some positive comments when we asked them what they did like about OpenSearch. Comments range from observations on the people behind the project, the openness and how inviting OpenSearch was, and positive statements about the fork of OpenSearch itself. And so this is kind of nice to hear this, that they were actually coming out, talking about OpenSearch, its origins, all those kinds of things. So those are all positives there. So this is just a study. What are we doing about these findings in OpenSearch is something that Kris, our community manager, is going to explain to you.
Thank you, Aparna. A few things that we'll talk about next is how fostering trust is really important, both in our experiences with Amazon and especially with the OpenSearch project. One of the things I keep referring to in this mindset of trust is Amazon has these leadership principles. One of them is called earn trust. Really, it talks about enabling, treating others with respect, listening to diverse perspectives. You can be vocally self-critical, something I honestly do a little too much maybe. And then you all trust and you're working towards a common goal. Our experience so far is these are taken very seriously. And Amazon and AWS have contributed to over 1,200 different open source projects across the communities. And a little anecdote I kind of like to share is I've got this experience. Most of my career has been in proprietary software, and that's a very closed mindset in a lot of ways for what we talk about in trust. a few months ago, maybe even a year ago, another major cloud provider brought out, I saw a news article that they launched a service based on OpenSearch. And, the proprietary mindset is, oh, here come the lawyers, right? But in an open source mindset, you look at it and you go, look, that's incredible, actually, because you have all these different communities, these different providers, these different corporations, and different people across the community now using it even more widely, which translates almost immediately back to more contributions back into this project. And guess what? That makes it better for everyone. We have an OSPO team to help us with different program management across the organization. And then even an open source strategy and marketing, or as they like to call themselves, awesome. They help us with a lot of different things. Back into the community itself, the project itself, building trust is you document things like a nice code of conduct. It's not really a rule set. I don't really like to look at it as a rule set, but more of a, how do we enable people to work together, and what are the different ways we respect one another? Build your ladders. Make sure you have a ladder towards a goal, right? One of ours, as I mentioned earlier, 17 different organizations have maintainers. We have a maintainer ladder with a set of responsibilities. That's a way to enable others to go up on that ladder and become a maintainer. And then build a way to onboard into the community. Next, a few practical examples and practical things that I've been lucky enough as a community manager to help foster within the OpenSearch project. 6 different pillars that will go into little details about each one. Community meetings. I think Aparna mentioned earlier, we had some feedback from the community that not everyone could attend. So we made this modification. So we have it twice a month. First one's 8 a.m. Next one's 3 p.m. So we kind of hit the globe in different ways. That way we can enable different parts of our community to come and take part in those community meetings in person. We also record them so you can come back and interact with what was happening and still interact with the community in that manner. Cracking open these triage meetings, making them public. Come on in and help triage these issues. Some people prefer to do that just through GitHub, through the interactions on GitHub and through the project itself. Sometimes it's beneficial to have these open discussions. So both doing this enables your community to do both. Back to documenting things. Our security team, as I mentioned earlier, they were the first ones to do this. They built this wonderful triaging file out in their repo. Some of the different some of the different repos have their own triaging, and that works for this part of the product. That's okay. Nice way to talk about to build trust with your community is actually talking about them, enabling them, and showing the world what these amazing things are happening and what they're doing with the project. Blog about them, blog with them, enable them to blog, and then talk about them on your social media channels. Forums and Slack. As a community manager, I always default back to this forum, right? We're all very, very familiar with what forums do. One of the things I like mostly about forums is the concept of a networked answer. This thing lasts for a long time. If someone didn't find the answer in a documentation or some of the official pieces, they're going to come into the forum and find that and maybe find this little niche issue that they might have had helped with, and enabling real-time conversations on Slack. Again, back to documenting things. This enables people to know what the ladders are and what the responsibilities are and ways you can interact with one another. I'm a maintainer on the project website, so you also have this ability to build out, we're running out of time, build out how you come in, how you blog, how you add something to our newsletter, how to find an issue on the website maybe. User groups and conferences. Find your tribe, or allow your tribe to find you, right? We have this wonderful individual out in Chicago that's built this wonderful user group, and we just enable them. Come to things like this, and if you're lucky enough, have your own conference. And then lastly, I'll leave you with this. If you're interested in trying OpenSearch, our wonderful friends at Canonical, this team of Michelle, Medhi, Pedro, Mikola, and a bunch of others have built snaps. So go out to the Snap store, give it a try. It's there for you. And then thank you very much. Let's connect.